that in and of itself has significant implications in the political space, not only because 2024, when this is happening, is obviously a big election year. We reported last week about Trump's cozy relationship with the NRA, them having him speak at their outdoor show. It's one thing to have him speak, but it doesn't seem like they at least will have the same financial capabilities that they have had in years past to contribute to his campaign or to contribute to other down ballot races that are going to be important for who controls the House and the Senate in the upcoming races. And then going forward, whether or not they can continue to lobby. Obviously, their lobbying capability has been significantly diminished over the last several years, as we've reported in exclusive documents that we've obtained. Just all of their money seems to be going to legal fees in this ongoing corruption scandal. And if you can't, once you put it past you, and if you can't regain the trust of members or court new members to support your organization, where do you even go from there? It's going to be a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, we just had a story on their fundraising headed into 2024, where they had about $11 million between their PAC and Super PAC. And I actually just looked at their February 20th disclosures, and the number has not really changed very much, to be honest. I think it's gone up very slightly, but they're still in the $11 million range. Now, interestingly, even with all this, they're still ahead of the gun control groups. Not by a lot, but if you combine, Giffords, Everytown, and Brady, they have somewhere around 10.5 million. They're getting somewhere close to the NRA, but they're still behind them. But the NRA spent, for context, about $30 million, just under $30 million in 2020 on the election. And they spent about $50 million in 2016. So being at $11 million in going into February 2024, they have a lot of room, a lot of space to make up in that race to get back to where they were in 2020 when the candidate they back lost. So, and this is happening in the middle of that. Now, one of the things I think you kind of mentioned there is just getting through this is probably going to be a positive thing. It's, getting to the other side, whatever the other side looks like, should help them to some degree. But these are going to, I'd imagine there's going to be lingering effects from this for years, if not forever. I mean, we looked at Susan G. Komen, Race for the Cure, and a big blow up that they had that also involved the face of the organization and questions about their spending. And they've never reverted back to where they had been before that happened in the years that followed. There's the Wounded Warrior Project had a similar issue where they had excessive spending at the executive level that created a scandal. But they addressed that much more quickly than Komen, or especially the NRA. I think it was a couple months after the news broke, they had wiped clean the top of their organization, and they were able to recapture their fundraising efforts. It took years, though, for them. I think it was 4 or 5 years before they got back to where they had been. So those are some of the examples that I wrote about previously. But it's going to be a slog, even under whatever you think, whatever any individual looking at this situation thinks is the best path forward. It's, even if you get your ideal path, it's going to be hard. And so, we'll see. I mean, I think it's hard to argue that the path they've gone down the last 5 years has worked out well. It resulted in a bankruptcy that didn't even actually accomplish the thing that they were hoping to. And then they are here now with this verdict where the jury found they weren't protecting their charitable funds. I mean, that's a hard sell to a donor, right? Even if you wipe clean the organization and start fresh, this is always going to be out there. And it's a real problem. And, I think people underestimate how important it is, right? Because people look at the other gun rights groups, and some of them have grown, certainly, in the wake of this, but none of them have grown to the point where, even collectively, they make up the amount of funds that the NRA has lost during that time period, and the effectiveness it has. And a lot of them aren't trying to replicate a number of the things the NRA does. at the national, state lobbying level, or whether it's, or even things like gun safety training, which they're still the largest group in the country for that. So, there's a lot. It's going to be a long slog to get back to where they were, if they ever can.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point. There's a lot of balls in the air, but I think, either way it goes, like you said, no matter what course they decide to take, the remaining leadership decides to take, it's gonna be a landscape altering next few years in gun politics. For example, when the big dog is sort of not where it used to be, and like you said, the other groups are doing a lot of work and are making headlines, especially in the courts, but don't have anywhere near the capability to just come in and replace the NRA.
No.
Where does it go from here? Where does the gun rights side of the ledger go from here?
Yeah. And, this was one of the complaints that the NRA tried to raise in this case. One of the defenses was that this is kind of the outcome, one of the outcomes that Letitia James, the Democratic AG from New York, was hoping for. She's clearly a political opponent of the NRA. She, while she was running for AG, said that she thought they were not a charity, but a domestic terror organization. Clear bias against the group. She initially was trying to dissolve them outright, to shut them down, which I think, if you look back at the coverage of that at the time, a lot of people from across the political spectrum were concerned about that. An AG using her governmental power to shut down one of her political opponents. Now, the judge removed that option from this case, and he also removed the defense of complaining of the AG's bias from the NRA. Like, it wasn't a viable defense in court against these allegations of corruption. It didn't last on appeal either, but the NRA did still try to make that case to the jury, oftentimes as they went through, to try and get the jury to believe that all of this was unnecessary political attack, essentially, from the Attorney General, and that in connection with that, it wasn't necessary because the organization had reformed itself, that it had put in safeguards, that it had fired some of the bad actors. Now, obviously, the jury didn't buy that. The jury did not feel that whatever the political motivations of the AJ might be, those were enough to overlook the corruption that occurred inside the NRA. And they didn't feel clearly that the reforms the current leadership claims to have made were enough to remedy the situation. Right? I mean, that's clear from their verdict. And so, but it's still interesting, because if you step outside of the court and look at the situation, this case really did harm them significantly as a political entity. They're not now, that's sort of intertwined, of course, with the corruption itself. The exposure of the corruption came from one of their political opponents, right, by filing a case like this. But, it's hard to unmingle those two effects, because the AG is, I think, fairly clearly politically motivated here, but the people she's, the NRA and LaPierre and its leadership gave her a lot of openings to go after them on non-political grounds. And this is where they've ended up.